Great. Well, thank you for coming. Sorry for the Zoom issues that we had, but we're excited to get started. So we're going to be together for probably 35 to 45 minutes. And if you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. But let's get started. So we're going to do some intros. We're going to give an overview of what the B Corp assessment and certification process looks like. And then we'll have time at the end for questions and discussions if people would like to share about their experience with B Corp, and we can talk more about what our experience has been helping others get certified. So Naman, you want to go first, introduce yourself?
Sure, I can do that. Hey everyone, my name is Naman. I stay in Toronto, Canada. I run a media platform. It's called Epic, where I curate stories of startups and small businesses that are helping the planet and/or the people in any way possible. I also run a weekly newsletter. It's called Not My Problem, based on the same idea, but with a more global approach. So every week I curate stories of three startups across the globe which are solving problems plaguing the planet. And yeah, I co-host this event with Eliza. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
And I'm Eliza Erskine. I'm the founder of Buoy Consulting, and we provide sustainability consulting, reporting, strategy, and B Corp certification help to small and medium-sized businesses. So next slide, please. Okay, so B Corp certification is a certification that's given by a group called B Lab. And the certification means you have passed B Lab's criteria for certification and are approved as a company that incorporates people, planet, and profit into your business structure. B Corp companies have to fill out an online assessment. You change your legal standing to a benefit corporation, and you pay a fee to get certified through B Lab. A good way, I think, to help explain the certification is to look at companies that are already certified. So Allbirds, Lemonade, Patagonia, Eileen Fisher, these are all companies that have been certified to the standard by B Lab. And B Lab looks at the strength of your business in 5 main areas: workers, governance, customers, environment, and community. It's truly a holistic look at your business focused on these 5 areas. Next slide, please, Naman. Great. So why get certified? Companies definitely look to B Corp as a certification of their values and the actions that they're taking to support the planet. So especially for companies that are growing or don't have a robust sustainability team, but either have a mission that is about sustainability or know that they're taking action on sustainability, the certification process is a great way to cement those practices and prove that you're taking action. So there are a ton of statistics about how B Corps grow faster, they have better customer retention, they perform better during the pandemic. And these are just quotes from companies that have been certified that I think, speak to the benefits that B Corp gives. So the first one from TMI Consulting, she is talking about how she doesn't have to look for staff anymore. They come to her. So for recruiting, B Corp can be a really important indicator. And then the other one from Assurity Life Insurance, he's talking about how B Corp is beneficial for him doing business with other companies. So when he's looking for partners, suppliers, the B Corp seal kind of helps set a standard for that option for them. So let's talk about the certification process a little bit. We looked at different companies that are certified. B Corps talk a lot about the benefits and employee engagement. Obviously, someone like Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's, these are companies with a significant following and companies that have made a significant environmental commitment as well. So the certification process. So to get certified, you have to complete the B Corp impact assessment. It's about 100 to 120 questions, depending on your industry, in those 5 areas that we talked about earlier. So workers, environment, governance, community, and customers. And then you receive a score of 80 or higher in order to get certified. Each question is weighted differently. It has different point values. And then each question also asks for proof or documentation of each answer. So once you've gone through the assessment, you submit it to B Lab. B Lab reviews it, and then you meet with them to go through the application. And if you're still at above 80 points at the end of that review, and you're approved, they do other kind of background check items. The legal requirement is next. So you have to legally change to a benefit corporation, and then you're approved. So that's sort of an overview of the process. On the right, you can see some sample questions. So they'll look at like how diverse your suppliers are, how you measure diversity internally, different pay ratios, and then diverse ownership. So next slide, please. Okay, completing the assessment. This is really the kind of bulk of what we're going to be talking about today. This is where a lot of people have questions, and this is where definitely what kind of where people get caught. So like I said earlier, it's about 100 to 120 questions. It's based on your business type and industry, and then covers those 5 areas. It is an online platform. You go through each question, through each area, and then provide data on your company that B Lab then later verifies. So points are weighted differently based on your industry and the type of business that you have and how you answer other questions. You do need a minimum of 80 points to be certified. However, if you're going through the assessment and you're preparing to send it to B Lab and meeting with them, they do a review, and most companies drop at least 5 points. So I recommend applying at above 80 points just to make sure that you have a buffer. So most companies apply at least 85, 86. I had a client that is applying this week and they got to 100. So it's really maximizing the points, making sure that you have enough buffer that you can be comfortably above 80. So next slide, please, Naman. Thank you. Okay, common questions that I get. The first, and this is probably the most common question, how long is it going to take? Unfortunately, the answer is it really depends on your company. I know that's probably not very helpful. So let me just talk a little bit more about timing and how you can help figure out how much time this is going to take you. So when I talk about time, and especially with clients, there's 2 main factors to consider. How much do you already have documented, and what resources do you have to allocate to this? So for each question, you have to provide proof. Some of that is policies, some of that is things you already have documented or actions you've already taken. So if you're going through the assessment and you have already done the majority of what they're asking, you already have those policies in place, it's going to take you less amount of time because you won't have to go through the process of writing those policies, documenting all of that behind the scenes information. So that's sort of the first thing to think of, is how much do you have documented. The second is like resources to allocate. You know, are you trying to get 10 other high priority items done? Do you have a team that you can dedicate to this? Is this something that you want to pay someone to do for you? Is this something you're trying to do yourself? There's really no average because it also depends on the size of your company, but this is definitely not something that you can complete in an afternoon. So I recommend, you know, allocating a couple hours every week for a couple weeks. I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago. She has blocked off Friday for like 2 hours, and that's her time to dedicate to getting certified. So the other time thing to keep in mind is the time that it takes for you to begin the assessment. And then once you have completed the assessment, that's kind of the first part. And then there is also a significant amount of time for B Lab to review it and for you to meet with them. Right now, B Corp is working with like a 5 to 8 week queue of applicants. So even once you do apply, that's sort of only the first part. And then you have to wait for B Lab to get back to you. There's certain kind of follow-up questions and things that you go back and forth with them. So it takes a while on their end to review things. So if you have a goal around, I want to be certified, say in 2021, if you submit your application in even, September, that still might not be enough time on B Corp's end. So if you're thinking about it that way, I usually like to give like a 6 to 8 month total time frame, depending on what you're working with. So the second common question is, I don't do blank. Is that okay? So companies that say, I don't have a lot of environmental activities, I don't have any employees, I don't have a lot to show in one area, is that going to affect my score? So my recommendation for that is lean into the areas that you do have, that you are strong in. There's something that made you look at B Corp and say, I can do this. This is great for my company because of XYZ. So you will need to show some things, again, depending on your industry and different documentation. But B Corp also tailors the assessment to your industry. So if you're a service-based business, they're not going to ask you the same questions they would ask manufacturing businesses. Those aren't going to be as heavily weighted compared to, a company that makes products. That's going to be a lot more questions about waste and those types of things. So the last kind of common question, and we'll have time at the end for other questions that you might have too, is how much does it cost? So if you go to B Lab's website, and I'll share this with you, B Lab has a list of pricing on its website. Pricing is based on revenue. So I believe it's $1,000 annually. That's the fee if your revenue is under 150,000, and then it goes up incrementally from there. They are transparent with this information. So if you look on the site, you can see that it's on there. So those are some common questions. Again, at the end, if you have a question or you think of a question now, put it in the chat and I'll get to it at the end. Next slide, please, Naman. Okay, so these are some things to keep in mind. These are kind of my tips and tricks. So the first is that B Corp is I call it it's transparent, but it's also private. So by that, I mean, nobody knows that you've started the assessment, but the points are transparent. So as soon as you start the assessment through the website, you'll be able to see all of the questions and all of the points based on your answers. So you have flexibility to play around and say, okay, if I answered this differently, or if I improved this internally, this is the score that I would get. And you're able to see all the questions ahead of time and can move around and use each section as you have time to do it. But again, if you don't tell anybody that you're working on the assessment, no one is going to know. It's between you and B Corp. And then the second thing I think it's important to keep in mind, and also as a big benefit, is that B Lab really wants to help. B Lab is the body that certifies you as a B Corp. So they want people to get certified. They're really interested in growing this movement and spreading the word, and they want to be of service to you. So when you sign up for the assessment, you'll get emails from them. They offer office hours and email support and FAQs on the site. On the site, there are a full list of resources like employee handbook guidance and supplier guidance. And then within the assessment itself, if there's something that you have a question on, there's they look kind of like footnotes, but in the assessment, if you're like, what is this definition of a living wage, for example, within the assessment, it will define that, and there's different FAQs within this. The third kind of thing to keep in mind, and just another recommendation I have, is to lean into your company structure and culture and type. So just like I said in the previous slide, B Corp's assessment is by industry and by company type. So the assessment is already set up for what it will grade you on based on that. But if your employee benefits and employee engagement are really strong, start there and use that interest and focus area to continue to build points. The assessment is designed to show you what really innovative companies are doing. So if you look at this in employee engagement, for example, and you say, I hadn't thought of that, that could be an opportunity for you to develop that within your company and then get points for it. Use your team to help you in the assessment process. Use it as a goal setting tool. The way that you kind of structure goals and other initiatives within your company, you can apply that same format to B Corp. And then the last kind of thing to keep in mind is that time is on your side. There is no time requirement for this, which is both good and bad, of course. But once you start, you can come back to it and go at your own pace. You can set aside an hour a week and do 6 months if it takes you that long. Anyone can start the assessment. Anybody can use it just to go through and kind of make changes and see where they can enhance different areas of the company that they're interested in. So I recommend that you do start the assessment, just because time is on your side, and that way you don't have a lot to lose. The other thing to think about with time is that the assessment updates, usually it's about every 18 months. B Lab just kind of refines it or makes changes to different weights. And because you have to include your company revenue, if you do take a long time, which I think is pretty common, a lot of clients that I've had or people that I've talked to, they started like 3 years ago and they're just updating it every time. So just keep that in mind, that you will have to update it every year if you do get to that point. Next slide, please, Naman. Thank you. So there's 2 websites, 2 resources, and these are websites. I tried to put them in the chat last time and it didn't work, but let me see if I can do it this time. Nope, it doesn't work. So I will email this here. I'll put just the link in. The legal requirements are laid out on B Corp's website, and that shows basically by state and by country which what the process is to change to a benefit corporation. That's part of the thing. And then this is the B Corp website with the certification. So like I said earlier, their website is very robust in the resources that they offer. So I definitely recommend you explore that, take advantage. I'm also going to email out a list of companies talking about why they became a B Corp. Some of those other statistics that I talked about earlier that will just kind of help you get into the assessment and the reasons why other companies become a B Corp. So next slide, please, Naman. Thank you. Okay, questions. If you have a question that you have or something that you want to dig deeper on or have me go over again, you can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself and we can talk about it. No questions?
Hi, thanks for sharing. It's Andrea here with Nature.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I was just paying attention to saving the links here, so that's good. No, it's always good to hear an overview. Can you give some examples of maybe some other food companies or retailers that you're hearing like this is, you have to have it, and it's really helping make the decision for them to consider, you know, that next decision for new clients or new products. I mean, it's such the toy of the investment versus, we know it's a good thing. Nobody's, you know, we all know that, but.
Right. I'm trying to think of food companies specifically. I have seen different like coffee roasters that have done it, and I think they see it as a kind of duality with fair trade. Like it's just kind of an additional seal. And I think originally it was a differentiator. I'm not sure how much that is true now.
Gotcha.
I'm seeing other breweries do it too. The thing that I have been asking food companies about is sort of how they see it versus organic.
Yeah. There's so many certifications for food, right?
Yes. So I think if you're not getting it from a customer side, the thing that I would consider is if you think it will help you with recruiting and hiring. Depending on your size and kind of the age or I guess level that you're hiring at, if that makes sense. Like if you're hiring at the executive level, it might not be as important if you're hiring like millennials or Gen Z.
Yeah,
like if
they want that social responsible, you know,
exactly
cause-based, purpose-based.
Yeah.
It depends on how transparent you are too as a company and what you stand for. For us, like being healthy and being fresh and being made in Ontario and being, you know, biodegradable and compostable and like have all those things as transparent as possible. And we have certified materials. So it's like, it's that balancing act, right? What do you invest and spend? How much does that symbol mean?
Yeah.
What are you living and breathing and walking the talk every day?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If you go onto B Lab's website, there's a directory and you can search by, like you could do Canada food and beverage. But yeah, I think, like you said, I think there's been a big shift between, okay, here's B Corp and that's what I'm going to do. Whereas more and more companies are like, well, I can just talk about what we're doing on our own.
Sharing that story.
Yeah. And using that as a way to communicate with customers.
At least as a starting point until, you know, that cost benefit and, or to your point, if a customer or retailer really says, now this is the deciding factor, I maybe see it within, you know, different criteria that, you know, it's preferable, they want to know, but it's also those other things. Can you prove, can you say, and are you doing what you say you're doing? Those kinds of things, right? So, you know, like to your point, is it organic? Well, number one, they have to prove that it's organic. They have to prove it's their certification, right? Or if you're under you know, a green or bullfrog type of building, you know, those kinds of things.
The other consideration that I've seen companies do is, if from a price perspective, because B Corp ranks it on revenue, then it's like, okay, well, let's get certified while we're lower revenue. And then
earlier stage versus
which I think is interesting that they do it that way. I'm not sure how else they would price it. But yeah, I think the more kind of powerful B Corp statement I've seen is where it's like, we're the first in the industry and we're not doing other things. We don't feel comfortable talking about it on our own. We want to use this to sort of create a system and then spread the word that way. Whereas if you already have a system in place that's working for you, it's hard to make an argument for B Corp.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Balancing act, right?
Yeah. So I'm curious what the Canadian perception of it is. So I know in the UK, it's like exploding. In the US, it's definitely like, okay, this is a good seal. It's like an indicator. Whereas here, even I don't know that like like organic seems like something that wouldn't be taken as
like there's certain stores for sure, smaller retails and markets or smaller chains.
Yeah.
Or even individual, you know, I'll give a call out to like Mama Earth or something like Mama Organics, like that is based on what they do and all the, you know,
right.
But at the same time, I don't think there's that industry wide, especially for my sector, that B Corp is going to drive that much more business at this point. Because at the end of the day, it's like, yes, it's nice to have and it's important, but it's not going to be a deciding factor on growing your business.
Yeah, I would agree with that for that industry. I think that's a great point. Someone else has a question. How is B Corp's presence outside of the USA? Which I think similar to, you know, the Canada question. It's so much of where you're at. I think like in the UK, they now have a huge kind of community around it, and it's much more visible to the consumer, and that's sort of become their like, okay, we're making a difference because we're a B Corp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's similar here, but I think in Europe, because there are legal things in place for companies, like you have to report on certain things and you have to disclose greenhouse gases and other, in Europe, I know, I don't think it's not as much of a signifier in that way. Whereas I think I talked to companies in like South America and Africa, and that is a huge indicator for them as they try and sell to Europe, to the United States from those areas, having the B Corp seal for them.
Yeah, for that safety, the credibility, all those things.
Yeah. And then here's another question. We've tried to certify in the past, but we haven't been able to get past 80 points. What are some common obstacles or misunderstandings you see from small service-based companies? So if you're really close from a points perspective, I find that it's usually policies or things that you just haven't developed. Adding things like a employee, there's one that's like employee and environmental procurement. You have to have a policy that talks about that. You have to have a supplier code of conduct. Those things are worth a lot of points. This question is about service-based companies. If you are really close with points, what I recommend doing is if you download the Excel version of the assessment and then you sort by points, then you can see there should be a couple of things that rise to the top that are usually worth 3 to 4 points. And then it's really just creating a plan of attack to either put that policy in place and take it from that. And the other thing that is important to note, B Corp will check for documentation for, I would say, 80 to 90% of it, but they will definitely check documentation for anything that's above a point. So if you've said, oh, we have this policy and it's worth like 3 points and you don't have it, that you have to have it. So from the kind of obstacles, I would recommend doing that download and then just looking at what you need from the higher point value. And then the opposite that I've seen companies do is they're just like, get the low hanging fruit. So it's like doing an employee survey, and that's like half a point, or doing sort of kind of one-off things that you can record and then get points from that way. But if you download it, I find if you download it in the Excel, then it's easier to see kind of where you're at and what you need to look at. How often is the certification renewed? It's renewed every 3 years. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Can I ask, for the renewal, do you have to go through the whole process again, or is it a shorter update for the 3-year renewal?
It's more like an update. I think they're expanding that part of it a little bit. I'll say recently, in the past probably 2 months, B Corp has gotten called out a little bit for some kind of, they do run a background check, and there's kind of disclosure questionnaires that you have to do. But like Hootsuite is a company that was B Corp certified, and it later came out that they were funding things for ICE in the United States and were contributing to problems at the border and illegal immigration things, and they had hidden that, and then it kind of came out, and so B Corp had to take a stand. So I think the renewal is basically just, as long as you're continuing to do what you do and you have certified at like 85 or higher and you are continuing those programs, it's not going to be a problem. It's basically just a check. But if you have, for whatever reason, stop doing whatever has gotten you points, which it's just not very common, then that will be a thing. But I think B Corp is getting more robust with checking, and I don't know that they definitely look at your financials, but like looking if you're investing in something, or for food, it's not as much of I can't see it being a problem, but they look at like alcohol and gambling and just kind of those types of layoffs is another thing that they will look at. So have you started it, Andrea? Have you like looked at the thing, or?
I literally looked at it. Yeah, that's it. I've looked at it a couple of times. I'm like, I haven't really seen the push or the real need weigh cost. I mean, I know there's a good value in it for sure, but it's the need and the time versus the cost versus the benefit, all those versus what we do every day. Like you said, we're pretty active in sharing our story and connecting. And that's actually how, I met with Naman and did our interview a while back, and, just being more transparent and, especially with these new times, right? It's more about living and breathing and connecting and building your brand and your transparency and your social causes, right? That people can get to know you better.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think so much of it is like, if your customer is happy with that and the people that your stakeholders are happy with it, then there's your answer.
Yeah, I mean, we've been asked to fully certify for a couple of clients. Look at that. We're registered with we're approved members and registered with a few women-owned things for the diversity side, but I haven't fully certified either. So it's kind of, it's again, all those balancing acts, right? Like, we know we're doing the right things and those are being, credible and recognized. And like you said, the clients are happy with that so far. But in Canada, a little different than the US, I think if we push a little more in our growth and scale up in the US, it might become more, pressing, because they do check those boxes. And, from even attending some other sessions in the US for some of the bigger retailers and hearing what they're looking for, it helps. But again, it's not necessarily mandated, but of course, something like organic, if you have to be organic, then you have to be organic. Like,
right. Yeah.
You need to have those types of things. But, is it really, if you still fit the value and the niche, again, it's always, just truly evaluating what you can do and what the client wants. And as, like you said, earlier stage, if you do have the ability, it's definitely more probably advantageous to start it sooner than later. So
yeah, I think, and so much of it is like what you're willing to disclose, because a lot of companies in the past haven't felt comfortable disclosing, as I think now more companies are like, we're organic and here's this certification and here's this, and they're like, okay, well, we'll use B Corp and disclose to them and then get the seal. But if you're comfortable disclosing everything that you're doing, which at this point it sounds like you are, and that's people are taking that, then that I think is a substitute. I recently got certified as a woman-owned business. And originally I was like, oh, this will be really helpful for me to go to bigger companies. But I have found the most value in going to other women-owned businesses. So that's the other sort of B Corp, like people that are like, okay, well, we only want to do business with other B Corps, or we want to kind of have access to the community in that way. That I think is appealing to people as well.
Yeah. Like you said, each country, each province, they have different criteria for what they check, right? For new businesses and new suppliers as well. So
yeah. It's all things to keep in mind.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. I think if there aren't any other questions, we will wrap up. I will put our LinkedIn information in the chat. And then you have everybody, I think, should have our, I'll put my email in here too. If you have another question or want to keep talking about this, please email me. We do work with clients that are in that category of we don't want to do it. So if you want help, we do like a 90-minute strategy session to go through your assessment and give you recommendations for points. And then we also do longer term engagements. So if you want that help to kind of put your application over the top, we're here to help. So I think that's all. If anybody has any other questions, email, and thanks again for coming.